I want you to imagine that you're 18 years old. You're clever, hardworking, and you've been doing reasonably well at school. And everyone, including yourself, has high expectations for what you're going to do after you finish high school. As you start the application process, you realize that a key test for getting into the university of your choice is one for which you've had very little preparation for. Which asks you questions you're not necessarily asked, and for which you now have very little time. How would you feel? Stressed? Hopeless? Maybe let down by the system? This test is not an exam, it's a document that many universities require, and it's called the motivation letter. My contention is that students are prepared way too late for the motivation letter, and that students don't adequately understand what the motivation letter is all about. The good news is that I have a solution for all of you which you can apply. My idea is guaranteed to make your teenager years much better and also help you figure out what your direction in life is going to be. So in my talk, I'm going to talk about why this issue exists, why my idea is more important now than ever, and also the impact it's going to have. I've been a teacher in the US, South Korea, and Poland for about 8 years now, and without fail, I see some of the same patterns being repeated over and over again. Students begin the university application process in their final year of university, and when they sit down to write their motivation letter, they're what they feel is excruciating pain. And I speak from experience. During school, students are asked to do many things. They're asked to do homework, they're asked to do presentations and study for exams, but they're not necessarily asked to define themselves. So it's no wonder that they're stressed, because choosing university is one of the most important decisions that you're ever going to have to make. And you do it based on very little data about yourself. Schools are not very good at creating situations where you have to think about yourself in any structured way, right? They might ask you, well, what do you want to be when you grow up, but maybe not give you the tools to think about, well, who do I want to be and why? So the result is a shopping list of retrospective grades, awards, that doesn't really tell us the whole story. Whereas the CV is a place where you can list your grades and motivations, or rather awards and achievements, the what you've done, the motivation letter digs much deeper. It's very much about the why. And finding your why is very difficult, and I think that most students don't realize that because they're thinking about themselves. It's difficult because it's very much connected to your values, your goals, maybe even a personal mission statement, but when's the last time somebody asked you what your values are? I argue that my idea is more important now than ever because universities and the job market and the companies, they're becoming more global. So you're not just competing against local talent, but you're also competing against global talent. This makes getting in more difficult. A key factor in helping you get in is to be able to explain your why and then explain why you fit the position or that spot. Candidates who do this are seen as more resilient, and therefore they're more likely to get chosen. So let me explain that. Universities, just like anything worth doing, is not easy, and no one said that going to university is going to be easy. The people that persevere are people that generally know why they're undertaking the task in the first place. There are going to be times where your limits are pushed, and the key to pushing through these tough times is finding something that you find so much pleasure, satisfaction, and fulfillment in that you don't mind working hard because you're not doing it for any external reasons, but you're doing it for internal ones. According to Times article, an ability to persevere and complete tasks is something that 91% of university admissions officers look for in their applicants. But finding those internal reasons is a process, and I argue that the motivation letter is a key step in this process. But as it is, the motivation letter is just something that's tacked on at the end of your university career. Instead, it should be just a key part of these steps. It should be maybe the final step. The issue here is, this brings me to my second reason why I think the motivation letter is so frustrating, is that students begin them when it's already way too late. So one reason is that the motivation letter is misunderstood, and the second is that students start on them when it's already way too late. Universities and companies look for students or applicants who know their why and are able to justify why they would like to join those organizations. But getting to know yourself is not very easy, and it takes time. So getting to know yourself is difficult because you have to put yourself into new situations. And getting to those situations, you have to plan and think. And so much of that is not learning about what you want to do, but it's also learning about what you don't want to do. And that's why you should put yourself in those situations to find those things. So essentially, getting to know yourself is not a future-telling exercise. It's a reflective exercise. Now, when the time comes, many universities ask that you show who you are in a motivation letter and not necessarily just tell who you are. So these are very simple words, show and tell, but there's a world of a difference here. Because to show who you are through experiences, well, you've had to have done those experiences. It's very simple just to tell about yourself, that I'm interested in this and I'm interested in that. It's something different when you draw upon your experiences to show what type of person that you're going to be. The danger is that when you sit down to write your motivation letter in your last year of high school, you're not going to have enough experiences to draw upon. And at that point, you're not really going to have much time to get those experiences. This leaves you very little data to make one of the most important decisions of your life. Therefore, I argue that the motivation letter should be more like a roadmap, that you should write it in the beginning of your high school career, and then use it to figure out what next. So, enough theory, let's get into some practice. So, So what I would like to do now is I'd like to read the opening lines of a motivation letter from one of my students that I've taught in South Korea. So here it goes. The lives of the Viru people of Peru were dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. Unable to do much at night without sufficient lighting, they had to sleep early and wake up even earlier to utilize every second of daylight. Full moons, thus, were cherished for only those nights were bright enough for children to be out playing football and people to safely walk outside to their bathrooms. I was here to change that. My first trip to Peru was to provide families with 50 solar lanterns. Okay, so not what you expected, right? So let me give you some context. Jungwon was a student of mine whose dream was to get into Stanford. And his grades were good, but this was Stanford. So was everybody else's. What set him apart were his experiences. His father was a scientist, and he spent some time in his father's lab where he picked up a passion for renewable energy. He could have left it at that, but he didn't. He made a plan, he raised money, and he found himself in Peru giving a village electricity. So he didn't just talk about his interests or tell, but he showed through his experiences what his values are, what his motivation are. And these are the type of students that are going to get into university or the company of your choice. So why did I choose this example to share with you guys? Well, not only is it a perfect example of my talk, but it's also very inspiring. And because I'm a teacher, I would like to inspire you. It's what I do. But because I'm a teacher, I'm also going to give you a homework assignment. Yes, and you better do it or I'll chase you down. Actually, I'm going to give you 3 homework assignments. So the first one, oh, I forgot about this part. This is an email that I got from Jungwon. And as you can see, he got accepted into Stanford. This was an exciting email that I got. And he said, though my grades and test scores were great, they were not perfect compared to many of the students that applied to Stanford, especially on the early application. I truly believe that what set me over the top were my essays. So I'll come back now to the homework assignment, which is very important. Don't forget to do it. So the first thing that I would like to assign to you is a graphic organizer. It's called the Ikigai. And essentially, it's from a Japanese, it's a Japanese graphic organizer, which translates into find your reason for being. And it is the intersection of where your passion, mission, your profession, and vocation meet. And I like this because it's very difficult to think about yourself. You don't really have much structure, right? So what am I supposed to think about? So graphic organizers are a great way to begin. So once you find your sweet spot, the second homework assignment that I want to give you is I want you to visualize it. Now this is very simple. All you need is a notebook, 10, 15 minutes in a cafe, maybe on a rainy day. We've got a lot of those lately. And I want you to visualize that sweet spot. So for example, let's say your sweet spot is to create a bakery. Well, write down as many details as possible about that bakery. What kind of music are you going to play? What kind of cookies are you going to have? Where is the bakery going to be? What is it going to look like? The more details you have, the more information or data you're going to have. What are the steps that I need to take to get there? You might realize that in the end, it's not really what I want to do. So visualize. That's the second homework assignment. And the last thing I'd like you to do, surprise, surprise, is write a motivation letter. Now, I know that many Polish universities don't require a motivation letter, but by writing one, this is going to help you figure out what major or course of study you're going to want to do. Regardless, in your lifetime, you are going to have to write a motivation letter, a personal statement, or a cover letter, whatever you want to call it. Odds are you're going to have to write one. And if you're working already, then think about what is the next step that you would like to do in your life and write a motivation letter to try to get there. This is going to help you figure out what the next steps are in figuring that out. So there's so many opportunities and choices for you guys. It's very exciting, but the longer that you wait, the worse off you're going to be. So figure out what moves you. Thank you.